All right, well, welcome to our session today. I'm Elliott Nelson. We started the HX Leaders Network a few years ago, and we started doing our first annual report in 2017 to discover what companies were doing with employee experience and how they were doing it, and to try and share some know-how and experiences, since it was a very new field, and how companies are using design thinking and agile and other methodologies. And a lot of those early companies back then, they were just a handful of people who were doing what was called at the time employee experience. And I think one of the first companies we interviewed was Airbnb, who had coined the term employee experience, borrowing from customer experience. We had IBM, GE, and some smaller companies in Asia, Europe, Latin America. And almost every one of them said, "Hey, can you introduce us to some others who are doing this kind of work and help us build a community?" So we have a formal network called the HX Leaders Network. There are two ways to get in. You can share your story and best practices you're learning with us, with the other community, and or you can pay for a membership. The membership is $990, and it's a lifetime membership, and it grants everybody access in your organization to the network. And we have, I'll share in just a second, we have a number of case studies and other things, and we also do every quarter a cohort call where we share what we're doing. And we also do a fair amount of matchmaking and connecting people directly with others who are tackling similar issues, similar problems, so that people can learn directly from one another. So that's a little bit about how we got started and who we are. Um, so a little bit about myself. I come from a background, I was a 4-time head of talent in different businesses at Siemens, at Novartis in research, at AkzoNobel, a Dutch chemical and coatings company, and at Pfizer. So I've lived and worked in Europe for over a decade, and also in the Northeast in the US. So started working on design thinking and employee experience a few years ago, because I recognized the idea that we need to co-create with our employees rather than cooking everything up in our teams and headquarters in HR. So yeah, we've transitioned or rebranded ourselves as the human experience of work, because we're human beings. And I want to focus on the fact that we're all different, we're imperfect, and that's wonderful. So the fact that we can design around what works for people rather than have a top-down strategy, I think is what's going to differentiate us in the end and create real competitive advantage, but most importantly, a great work environment for all of us. So I wanted to share a little bit about today, some research that we've been doing over the last year and a half on the human experience of work coming out of the pandemic, and how we can apply some of those learnings into situation with, if we can ask everybody to mute, if you don't mind, into the current experience and be able to co-create the new way of working. So a little bit about, so this is the third session today. You see here at the bottom of this slide, the logos of the different companies who are members of this formal network that I mentioned. So we have over 30 members today globally. And these are some things that we do. So, and we have 4 years of research going back to late 2017. So every year at the beginning of the year, we've introduced a new report for the year and what's going on with these different cases, a global survey that we do, and yeah, over time we've amassed these cases here that you see on the right of different companies. So the thing I love about this is that everybody has a different reason, a different use case, different business case for why they're doing HX work. And it's really fun to see the differences, different applications. A little bit about who we are. So HX Transforma, we do 3 main things. We help companies with our expertise on people-centric transformation. So how do you help senior leaders and build stakeholders and sponsorship for HX transformations, and actually do the work of mapping and co-creating journeys. And we bring this content expertise here that you see into the mix. We also teach functions, as you see here, the different players in the business, different functional areas, different parts of the business, skills and capabilities around HX content. So that's HX Wise. That's the capability building side. And later this year, we're going to roll out a what we call HX Marketplace, which is a go-to portal for any HX related jobs. So you can imagine if you're starting out, what are the first 3 jobs that I need, or first 3 skills that I need on my team? Or a year later, what are the next 10 that I need to bring into my team? And is that a build or a borrow or buy strategy? And for job seekers, what are the hot jobs? What's the career path for me? What are trends in my skills, et cetera? So all 3 of these things have come out of customers asking us for help in these areas. So gives you a little bit of background, in the sense that we also have some practical experience. And one thing I want to mention too about the network that you'll see in these summits that we do every quarter is we're really heavy on the practitioner side of things. So you'll hear people talking about where is employee experience going, or may share some studies or trends. We really like to bring in practitioners who have some uh, has some skill
Expertise.
about and some real knowledge about what works and what doesn't work inside of organizations. So let me just go back to, and please, if you have a question as we go along through this, please write it in the chat. So I'm going to share a little bit of research talking about what we were going through a year ago. And it hasn't been that long, but and we're all in different places. I know that in certain parts of the US, for example, especially in the Sun Belt, that people are working in their office, and also in Europe, people have come back to the office. In some parts of the world, there's still a big emphasis on remote work. So we're all in different places, but thinking back to where we were a year ago, some of the things that people were talking about when we did our study last, and I did also a number of interviews with companies in Asia, Latin America, US, and Europe, these kinds of comments. So their lives at stake. So this was a serious pandemic health-wise. People like the egalitarian aspect of this, the fact that that they could see their leaders in a very similar environment to themselves, sitting in their kitchen, wearing a normal shirt, not a suit and tie, or not a formal dress. So they felt more that we were all in this together, was the comment that was made. Um, a lot of people said, hey, look, a few weeks ago, we were talking about with our IT people about trying to get support for remote work 1 day a week, and we couldn't even do that. So the level of ability that we've been able to bring to bear to solve this because we had to has been phenomenal. So and also we had a lot more experimentation because we had to. So people were prototyping different ways of working and uses of technology to support, because of the fact that with office work not happening, we had to do something different. So also the idea that the thought during those times, even as difficult as it was to try and manage all the different things we were doing, a lot of people were expressing the feeling that I don't even know if I can go back to the office because I work longer hours here, but I like being with my family. I feel more balanced in my life. And they felt that their managers were concerned about the same things they were. So imagine that. We did over 30 workshops with HR leaders in different cities around the world last autumn. And I put in here we did some journey maps of their remote work experience. And you see some of those moments that matter that they mentioned here. So in Detroit, how can I create some breathing room before meetings? People in New York were wondering how engaged my team is and what help do they need. We didn't always have visibility on what was going on for people. A lot of people expressed what was said in Amsterdam. How can I have a more clear break between my family and my work life? Some people were even thinking, how can I find just 30 minutes to focus on special tasks? So a lot of very similar kinds of feelings being expressed around the world. And a lot of it had to do with the amount of pressure we were all feeling and not knowing what was going on. And that balance, finding the right balance between work and family life or personal life. So I'm just going to pause there. What were some things maybe that you were feeling back then a few months ago? And maybe you could write those in the chat here.
How are those assholes ever going to?
What are some things that you were going through? This is the audience participation part of the session. Okay, so staying connected. We had different and involving employee expectations. What else? Yes, what we were going through a year ago. So this is what we were feeling and experiencing a year ago. Certainly working longer hours than usual. We heard from a lot of people in these workshops that they were starting their day at 5:30, 6 in the morning and going till 11, 11:30 at night. So there was no end to it. Feeling motivated working from home. Yeah, certainly. Psychological safety. And Samantha, I think a lot of people shared the idea, the feeling that you just did. You loved working from home. I think even though the people, one of the things that if I could say there was a common theme was, yes, this is incredibly hard, but I love it. And also this idea also, I think Anna said, we miss our people, miss the office connections, the physical connection. And yeah, we had anxieties about our health. We had lots of interruptions. Yeah, lots of anxiety about uncertainty, what happens next. We still don't know what's going to happen next, but I think for many of us in certain places, we're starting to see very good trends. So that helps reduce the anxiety. One of the companies that we've worked with, they've done a series of anxiety pulse surveys, just asking people how they're feeling. And they've seen the anxiety levels drop from 80% of people feeling anxious and uncertain to around 12%. And this is, yeah, over the last year and a half. All right. So let me go back to this. And contrast this with what some CEOs are saying now. This is really interesting. So this is Sandeep Mathrani. He's a CEO at WeWork. Those who are uberly engaged with the company want to go to the office 2/3 of the time at least. Those who are least engaged are comfortable working from home. It's a very interesting assumption on his part that the people who are working from home are doing so because they're not engaged. Almost a causal. I'm reading maybe a little bit into it, but definitely putting people in a category that they might not fit, making a very big assumption. So the reason people are going to the office is because they're engaged. The reason they're not going is because they're not. A very interesting message. Jamie Dimon, I think all of us have seen this one. We want people back to work. My view is that sometime in September, October, to look just like it did before, and everyone is going to be happy with it. And yes, the commute, people don't like commuting, but so what? Very interesting comment. This is from CEO of Morgan Stanley, James Gorman. Be back in the office by September or else. If you want to get paid New York rates, you work in New York. None of this, I'm in Colorado and getting paid like I'm sitting in New York City. Sorry, that doesn't work. So What are your thoughts when you read those messages? What comes to mind? Yeah, they're very strong statements. Not in touch with their employees. Yeah. Anna, exactly. Do these people even talk with their employees? Um, so one of the things that comes to mind for me is, wow, if I'm working for one of these companies, how am I going to be motivated to want to go back to a physical workspace working for somebody like that? That's very demotivating. Talking about the first comment about motivation. So it depends on our goal and what kind of what kind of culture we want to create. If our goal is to bring people back to a physical workspace because we want to make sure that they're working and getting work done, that's not a great reason, but that's what this seems to be talking to. If our goal is thinking back to, and I know Owen and even Tuppy was talking about this in the first session, thinking about what is the problem you're trying to solve here? If the problem is, and why are what's the purpose of having a physical workspace? So being more purpose driven. If our purpose is to create a culture and an environment or a space for collaboration, and we have a particular strategy for how we're doing that, then this is not the way to go about it. There are different ways to communicate. So that's what we want to talk about here is what are some alternatives to this? So um, I'm just going to do our first survey. So we're going to talk a little bit about some actions to prepare to our work to the office. I want to go to our survey here, our first poll. And all right. Oh, this is going to be interesting because I think it's going to launch every single one of these things at once. So let me first go to my let me first go to the presentation. We'll come back to the poll and we'll do these all at once because I see I loaded these at once and I'm remembering something now about Zoom. So in thinking about our actions to prepare to work to the office, to return to the office, I want to ask you a few questions here. These are some different things that companies are doing, and we're going to ask you in a few minutes about um, what you're doing in your organization. So you can take a look at these things here. Some of the companies that we talk to are conducting surveys about how ready people are to return to the office. I remember last year, one of my favorite stories from Microsoft, there was a time in September where we thought we might be able to go back to physical workspace. So Microsoft ran this survey around their different countries and regions around the world. And they asked people in Eastern Europe how ready they were to come back to the office. 70% said, I'm ready, I want to do this. So 70%. They spent a lot of time preparing physical workspace, making it safe for the pandemic. And 2 weeks later, as they announced, they opened up the office. 70% said they would, 10% showed up. So one of the drawbacks about surveys is the kinds of questions we ask and how well we really do that research. But so I think we have to, just a little cautionary tale there, we have to be careful about how we ask information, how we gather insights, and to not assume because we get a certain response that it's going to come through that way. So let's talk a little bit about the state of HX today, the human experience of work. So we're running a survey right now, and I would love for those of you who are practitioners within your companies to take this survey and participate, and we'll share the results with you later. But the purpose is to try and understand, where are companies with regard to creating the human experience of work? What are some things that they're doing? And what are some tips or ideas that we can learn from in terms of using tools like design thinking to solve some serious problems. So our goal is to really to understand what people are doing and then share this across as many organizations as we can around the world. So we'd love to have you participate. So how big of a priority is co-creating the HX of work right now for companies? So from the results that we've had so far, we have about, what is this, 52% that are in the extreme or very, or high priority. So um, a slight majority see this as a big priority for the next year. If we ask about the level of maturity, and we've been asking this for 4 years, these are the different levels of maturity as we've defined them. So 80% of companies say they have no plans to do any HX work in the next year. 29%, so nearly 30%, say they're researching it, they're thinking about it, they're getting ready to start sometime in the next 12 months. Another 16% have started. They've already started to map some journeys, created personas. They've done some pilot work. So taken together, that's about 45%. And that's a pretty consistent level we've seen over the last few years that that companies are coming on board. So when we first started doing this research 4 years ago, I could only find 20 some people in all of LinkedIn that had the title experience. They had the word experience somewhere in their job title within HR. And it's a fairly new field even within marketing on the CX side, but on the employee side, employee experience or the HX of work is very new. Today, there are thousands of companies. We just mapped out all the companies in the Fortune 500, as well as different regions and major cities around the world. And we find a considerable number, the majority of companies now are focused on creating HX. So these numbers have stayed pretty steady, but it also reflects the fact that uh, 80–90% of all people who are working on experience within their businesses started within the last 18 months. So it's an incredibly new field. Um, so how's the organization using design thinking for co-creating new ways of working? So this gives you an idea of the kinds of things that we're doing right now. So observing, doing kind of ethnographic types of activities, asking questions, real pure design thinking work. About half of you are doing some of these things. Around half are mapping new journeys, and we'll share some of those in a moment. And close to half, 44%, are prototyping or co-creating new ways of working. Slightly fewer are using personas, and we're seeing a small but growing number of companies that are doing activity-based working. So studying, as Topi was talking about early with Kraft Heinz, looking at the situations where people work together and collaborate, and cataloging and categorizing those kinds of things and saying, how do we best support this? Is it a digital tool? Is it physical workspace? Is it a combination of those two? So coming at it from a problem orientation into those. And other respondents that we've had, very few are not using design thinking at all. So this is from our previous survey that we did a couple of months ago. And this is looking at end-to-end journeys. So if you look at joining an organization on the left and leaving on the right, and I've organized these in concentric circles. I've borrowed heavily from IBM and some other companies we like, but these concentric circles kind of help us think about the different kinds of journeys or experiences we're having. And the closer you get to the center, closer you get to that human element that we all have. And that heart in the middle represents the fact that we're emotional, and the emotional center of our brain is what helps us evaluate the importance of something and makes decisions. It's the most human part of us. So these journeys, as you get closer to that human center, take on much stronger importance. Those moments that matter, that are part of a lived journey, are much more on Maslow's hierarchy and on all of our hierarchies, a stronger, more compelling need. So the ones in yellow here are the ones that you're saying are the
Elliott,
journeys that
sorry, we
Yeah.
can't see any slides.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, thank you for telling me that. Here I am chatting away. It said it was sharing my screen and it must have dropped it. Okay, so let me just show those real quickly again. So this is how big of a priority it is. Was that Samantha?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So this is probably the first one you didn't see, is that right?
Correct,
Okay.
believe. Yeah.
So this shows you the graph. So how big of a priority is co-creating the human experience of work? So this is from our survey. So you can see it's around, what is that, 52% on the extreme and high level. The level of HX maturity. So 18% with no plans. We still see around 45%, nearly half at that researching or starting stage. This is where a lot of companies still are and have been, just because we've been adding so many new experience roles and functions within organizations. This, we've had the same categorization for the last 4 years. So this new way of working, this one is the biggest one that's grown. I think a year ago, this was around 10%. So we're seeing one out of 5 companies now who are responding to our survey say, hey, we've got a lot of our journey maps done. We're working in agile teams, pods, squads, tribes, more of a product approach. So I like to say all of the people or functions or capabilities that touch a particular journey are working together in these small product teams, and using design thinking and agile to really rapidly create new products. And so that's where we are as far as maturity. And here's this slide showing how organizations are using design thinking. So quite a significant number doing observing, interviewing, asking follow-up questions, mapping journeys around remote or hybrid work, doing prototyping. Again, because we had to. The things we were doing in the last 18 months we'd never done before. The use of personas is a big one that I like to promote. The idea being that you segment, you think about your users differently. And then we're referring to activity-based working. So thinking about the problem you're trying to solve and collaborating your team and what kind of solutions fit that, rather than saying, everybody back to the office, think about, okay, so what are the problems we're trying to solve here? And then here's the journeys. So you join on one end, you leave on the other, and then we have the concentric circles. So the work journeys that you see here on the outside, a week at work, contract work, things like performance management. A lot of our HR and work processes fit here. Things like Workday and our interface with those, our physical workspace, digital workspace, that's part of this work. The point I was trying to make is, as you get closer to the human center of this, the moments that matter take on even greater importance. My personal growth and development over here is even more important to me. Getting those moments that matter is even more important for me than work processes. And certainly the things around my family and personal life are even closer to me, and those moments that matter take on even a greater importance. So thinking about these from a needs standpoint, a human needs standpoint. The ones in yellow are the ones that, from a research, companies are saying these are the new kinds of journeys that they've mapped in the last 12 months. So as you would expect, hybrid work, some of the things around remote work, furlough over here, outplacement, those have taken on much higher in priority. We weren't even thinking about some of these things in some organizations. But yeah, you see organization redesign. I love the fact that companies are focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion as a particular lens for looking at experience. A lot of you are saying, hey, my system Workday or SAP Success Factors doesn't have a great user interface. The experience of that is lacking. So they're focusing on these types of things, and how I collaborate in projects and teams is new. So let's, I'm going to pause there for a second. And let's go to the polls. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to launch the poll here. We'll see how this works. And the first one is, we're gonna, and since I've put these all in one space, I'm still getting used to how Zoom does this. Drives me crazy a little bit. If you could answer, I'll give you a few seconds to answer each one of these. So the first one is around the activities that you're doing to prepare your return to the office. So if you could answer that one first. Take a moment. Anyone need more time on that one? So I'll let you look at those. There's several statements to this one, so I'll give you a moment to finish that one. Okay, so the next one, if you move on, how big of a priority is co-creating the HX of work in your organization? And it looks like you're starting to do the others. What's your level of HX maturity? And then finally, how are you using design thinking? So if you can answer those 4 little mini surveys for us. All right, a few more seconds here and we'll end the poll. All right, let's end the poll there and share the results. So the first poll, this is kind of small. I don't know if we can make this any bigger. So you're doing 85% of you said you're doing some CEO and HR communications with the workforce. Would love to hear some examples from that in just a minute. Doing a lot on workspace planning and adaptation. So that's number 2. And number 3 is surveys about readiness to return to the office. So, okay. So moving on, the second poll was about how big of a priority it is in the near term. Over half of you said high. The next level said no priority, so 15%. Okay, so somewhat similar results to the bigger survey. It's a smaller group. What is your level of HX maturity? So this gives an idea here. Again, where most people are in researching and starting. So thinking about what to do. And then a few of you are in building capability, and the next largest group is in new ways of working. Last poll. So the largest number of you are observing, interviewing, asking questions. That's great. So doing some real classic design thinking things. Mapping journeys is another one. So two questions I'd like to ask, maybe as a follow-up to that. If you can write in the chat, number one, what are the things that you're, let me just think here for a second. So in terms of the communication, what are some things that examples, maybe quickly, you've communicated to the organization? And number two, could you comment on the kinds of new journeys that you're doing right now for new ways of working? I'd like to see those too. So things that you're communicating and kinds of new journeys that you've done. Things you're communicating, kinds of new journeys. Go ahead and type those in the chat. So surveys about hybrid ways of working, not readiness to return to the office. I think that was a prior comment that Samantha had, right? So Lorado, communications on playbooks and power up lean in sessions. So Lorado presented, her colleague Hope presented to us in our last summit. They're from BCX in South Africa, a telecom and digital company in South Africa with business in EMEA. They do some really great work. Any other things that you'd like to share? So Anna, going back to the office, hybrid model, new rules of work ahead of us. Chad with Boeing communicating general timelines, expectations, manager authority to make specific decisions. Anything on journeys that you're doing that's interesting, that you're particularly pleased with in terms of the kinds of insights? Yeah, so Samantha had hybrid worker journey and hybrid manager journey. Samantha, you're at Orange, right?
Correct.
Okay, great.
Yeah. We're doing, in fact, it's two journeys
Mhm,
that are mirroring each other,
mhm,
where you have the at the office journey,
Yeah,
and for example, the other half of the week at home journey.
yeah.
And we're doing the same from the manager with these two types of journeys that interlink,
mhm,
because he can have employees that are home or at the office. So it's
Yeah,
a very interesting exercise. It's not easy, but that is the journey. Yeah, it's hybrid.
yeah. How has it helped you in your communication or your actual strategy? What are some
We're
things?
completely at the beginning, to be very transparent. We're starting to plan the rollout of these new ways of working in a couple of days. And
Mhm,
we're doing by phases. We've got about 60 countries to enter into this new model.
Yeah,
But we're going very progressively. The change management is really important because we have different levels of maturity on remote work, depending on the country. So we're going very, very progressively and working a lot on the change management
yeah,
side. And so we'll be really using these journeys with the countries in a couple of days to see how it helps them.
sounds like important work. Thank you for sharing that. So, yeah, I, I think that journeys are a good way to understand the context and the kinds of problems that people are trying to solve. So I think one of the things that we really tried to emphasize today in our presentations is that design thinking is a way to help us ask some different kinds of questions and know what questions to ask indeed. So just want to go back to this time. I'll make sure I'm sharing, but I'm just going to skip this one here because it's a lot of information. But um, within the playbook that I was looking at here a second ago, one of the things that we do is, and we've seen organizations do, is look at different kinds of work personas. So you could have one persona whose preference is to still work from home. Maybe they have some children, they have some family needs, whatever the situation, but understanding that there are different pains and gains and the goals that they have for why they prefer that. You might have others who prefer clearly to work in a physical office space and understanding about them. And then you have people that are more on the hybrid level who are looking at some mix of the two, and it depends on, and they have different needs as well. So the point is that you want to segment people and understand them differently rather than having a communication and an actual strategy that is a one size fits all, and be able to talk to the different needs of the different people in the communication. So thinking about how those three CEO examples could have been differently if they said, hey, I understand some of you have these particular needs, and for you, you might want to continue working remote. These are the kinds of things we're going to do to support that. For others who have the need for certain times to come in and collaborate in a physical workspace, here's how we'll support that, et cetera. So it's just being smart about it and being more aware and listening to your organization in how you do that. This is an example. So an extension of Emma, the work from home person. This is from one of the workshops we did last autumn in San Francisco with senior HR people about their experience of remote work. And I put this up here just to kind of show you an example. One example, I know there are different kinds of journey maps for different needs, but you see here all the different aspects of what people are going through from a day. They're starting, as I said, 5:36 in the morning. They're working till very late at night. And if you look here, as we did the journey map, we asked people to describe their typical day. What are you doing before work, during your work day? What are you doing at the end? It's very easy for them in these 30 plus workshops to talk about the things at work. But then we started asking them, what do you do when you're not working? What are the things that are going around for you with the people that you're living with and how you're interacting with them? And this is where you see, well, I've got kids with me. One senior HR person said, I've got 4 children, each in a different school, each with different kinds of remote learning setups. That's a huge challenge as a parent to try to support that. And she's running she's a manager of managers, so she's got a big organization to take care of all at the same time. So you see things here about at the start of the day, make sure kids are logged on and ready for school, that they're taken care of. They're checking their kids' homeworks in the evening, and they're also doing their work. And I asked them, what are you doing for yourself? That's kind of the last thing that people are thinking about is myself. Well, I'm trying to grab a bite to eat. I'm trying to find time to meditate. And I'm so busy, I'm eating lunch over the sink. I thought this was the most telling comment of how busy they were. So, and then you see here the gains and the pains, and the goals are the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And we asked them to vote on the moments that matter and also rate their experience. So the first number is how well was that experience delivered for me versus how important it was for me. So you have a fraction of 2 numbers there that give us an indication and of where we need to focus in our service delivery. But it's interesting because the moments that matter for a remote worker, especially in the autumn of last year, had nothing to do with work. And my point is that most surveys don't understand any of this context. They go right to the process and say, which of these 5 things is most important to you? And it's missing the most important thing, which is, how can I make sure the people that I'm living with are successful? So I'm a big promoter. I think it's great that so many of you are doing personas and remote work, because I think this is a big way to help us move forward with this. You can also use, we use text a lot of times to look at different groupings of topics to see which kinds of problems or issues are related. We can measure changes in things over time, group things in a matrix by positive and negative, and an NPS rating, those types of things. So being able to look at open text and just asking people what's working well and how can we improve it. Sometimes if you ask those 2 questions with an NPS or a satisfaction rating, you can learn everything you need to know. So I want to just finish on some key strategies, and I did share these in an article that I published on my LinkedIn site last week, and please feel free to go on there and download it, share it with your organization, share it with your network. I'm hoping that this is helpful in some way to some of you. If there's at least one idea that you can take away, uh, I'll feel helpful. So the first one is, looking back at the last months, really acknowledge what people have done, what they've been able to accomplish, the sacrifice that's been there, um, and really capture what we've all been through. This is the starting point for all of this: is to acknowledge the hard things that we've been able to work through and solve in the last 16 months. This is extremely important for engagement and winning hearts and minds. If you're going to ask about motivation and reasons for people coming back to a physical workspace or a hybrid workspace, whatever it is, ask these kinds of use case questions. I go into the office when, so think of a situation, so that I come thinking about a problem to solve or an outcome that they're focusing on. Same thing about working from home or working hybrid. Always focus on the problems to solve first as a way to identify your way forward. Next is to try and segment people into different personas or use cases. The 3 might be office, remote, hybrid. Maybe you have production people, maybe you have other people involved in this. Thinking about not just demographics, but also the needs or the problems they're trying to solve, or the motivations. Those are the things that are really interesting in segmentation. And then think about how those different personas work in teams, how and where they get support, etc. And then keep experimenting. Trust your people. Design around what works. I remember one of the more fascinating companies that I visited a few years ago and profiled was BP, British Petroleum, and outside of London. And they'd created some prototype workspaces for people to come in and experiment with different desk arrangements, different meeting space, different tech tools. And then one of the other things I think is, let people use their own stuff based on what works. If they have a particular tool, if they have a particular kind of workspace, let them personify that, let them individualize that and bring that to the work. The other piece of advice I would give from our research, I was talking to one of our clients in Turkey a few weeks ago, and they were saying how, although they're the largest, most successful company in that market, that Amazon Russia is coming in and recruiting people because of remote work, because they can. So the idea that Jamie Dimon or any one of these financial services people in New York thinks that everybody has to come back to work, or they don't have to pay rates or compensation because people aren't living in the market. The fact that other people are doing that and offering that. My own son works in tech. He had a job in Boston. He's living out in the Western US. They paid him Boston compensation and said he didn't have to move. So the fact that anyone is doing it or offering that experience is going to change the game for us. And there's a high percent of Gen Zs and millennials who will quit if they can't have remote work. So we're not going to go back to the way we were, and it's going to be a very interesting time in the next weeks and months. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Let me just, sorry, I want to share one more thing here. If you could please go on to the hxleadersnetwork.com site, take our survey, and you can download our article. I hope this is helpful for you in some way. I really appreciate everybody being on the call today, and wish you all the best. If there's anything that we or I can do in terms of connecting you with others that are maybe solving a problem that you're working on, if I can connect or share research in any way, please contact me and I'd be glad to help. Thanks again and best wishes.